All right, we're part of New England Fan Fest. We have our Q&A for All Access Entertainment. I am with legendary WWF, I love saying WWF, Hall of photographer Steve Taylor, who last night was inducted into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and Joe Bruin gave me the honor of inducting you, and I hope I did you justice, and it's an absolute pleasure. Welcome to Fan Fest. There we go.
That was that. Much better.
It
was quite an experience. I loved it. It was great meeting everybody, and I was quite humbled and honored to be a part of that group. It really was very, very awesome.
Justly due. Your work does not go unnoticed, sir. Tell us about your childhood and when you first discovered professional wrestling.
Okay. I was born in Syracuse, New York. My dad was in the service. He was a military science professor at Syracuse University and stationed there for a while. And then after that, I traveled around with the family because he was with the Strategic Air Command. And we lived everywhere from Oklahoma to Florida to, I was in Guam for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Plattsburgh. And then when he retired to the Finger Lakes of upstate New York. And at that point, like I talked about last night, I was an amateur wrestler.
Mm-hmm. I won't mess with you then.
It's pretty funny that like I said last night, that I was an amateur wrestler. I was the captain of an undefeated team, and I was a 33-1 dual meet record and county champ. I never thought I would be inducted into a pro wrestling Hall of Fame. So it's quite the honor.
Yeah, I think it was a great class too, because I said at the outset, as the host, we had wrestlers, we had a referee, we had announcers, and we had photographers, people behind the scenes. It was
right,
because it's more than just the wrestlers that make up this industry. It's sometimes I'm a ring announcer, so like I'm kind of like a background player, but I'm an important part of the show.
Right.
You're a photographer. Like I said last night, you captured so many iconic moments, some of which we're going to get into here, but no, and we're honored to have you here, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not really a wrestling fan growing up. I had no exposure to it. And my first wrestling match was when I was a news photographer at a daily newspaper in upstate New York. And a gentleman there was a sports writer, Ed Holinsky. And Ed Holinsky was a huge wrestling fan. He said, "Hey, wrestling's coming to town. I need a picture to go with it." I said, "Fine, great." So I said, "I need a picture page for the Sunday newspaper." And every Sunday we had a picture page, and I had to come up with a different idea. I said, "Well, professional wrestling sounds great." I had never been to an event. That was my first one. And I walked in there, and I was just amazed. I loved everything I saw. I loved the fans reaction,
Yeah.
Sergeant Slaughter, Ivan Putski. It's just, the whole event was just so entertaining.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a ball. And that was my first exposure to professional wrestling. And then it ended up that the pictures that I did, Ed sent back to Vince McMahon, and Vince loved it and flew us both down to Cape Cod to have lunch with him.
Oh.
And he was telling us all the stories that he wanted to do and how he was going to take this wrestling thing worldwide. And I said, "Boy, this guy's nuts."
Yeah.
I said, "But you know what? If he pulls it off, I want to be part of it."
Hell yeah.
And so he offered us both jobs, and that's how we started.
That's great. That's great. So this was probably 83, 84?
83.
Okay.
Yep.
I just remember from the names, that's the way my wrestling brain works.
Yep.
You say Putski, Slaughter, I'm like, all right, which is that 1980, 83, whatever. So when did you first get involved in actual photography itself?
I was basically a photography fan. Started taking pictures. When I was young, my brother had a nice camera, and I borrowed it. And I actually covered a football game at the local high school. And I sent it into the weekly newspaper, the Skaneateles New York Press, and they published it. It was a really bad photo, by the way. It's kind of embarrassing when you look at my first picture. But they published it and put a little photo by Steve Taylor. And at that point, I was hooked. I was like, this is really cool. I can get paid for taking pictures. I think I got $5 for the picture.
Hey.
And so I continued on taking pictures for them, and they gave me more and more assignments. And then the daily newspaper the next city over was the Citizen in Auburn, New York. And they saw my work, and they said, hey, do you want to start taking pictures for us? And so I did. I think I got a raise to $10 a picture, so daily newspaper. And they got more and more involved. They started giving me assignments. And when I was going to college over at Auburn Community College, they offered me a job to start working in the darkroom and taking more pictures, and I just continued on from there. So it was great.
That's great. I wish I knew your secret. You said your first photo that you took of that football game was not a good picture. I had a 35 millimeter camera. I used to go to the Boston Garden every month for wrestling. Got the nice lens. I couldn't take a good picture to save my life. I would get home and go get the pictures developed. Couldn't wait to see them. I'm like, oh God, I suck at this. So, all right, so this is kind of like a loaded question, but walk us through the day of WrestleMania 1.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
He says, walk us through the day of WrestleMania 1. When did you start with?
I started August 1st, I think, back in '83. Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is before WrestleMania. And at that point, WrestleMania was just an idea Vince had. No one knew that there would be WrestleMania 2 and 32 and
40
keep
coming
growing.
up, yeah.
Right. So it was basically like a big televised house show at that point. It wasn't, we started with the big hype. This was one of the first shows that we actually started doing a lot more hype, doing behind-the-scene pictures and getting more publicity and becoming more mainstream. At that point, the mainstream media hadn't really picked up in wrestling, but as more and more people got involved, it became that.
So that kind of segues into the next question I've been given is, how important was it to have the celebrities at WrestleMania 1?
Oh, I think it was huge. I think at that point, like I said, that's when the mainstream media started looking at it and go, wow, look at, there's, Liberace, there's Cyndi Lauper, all these people, they became involved in it. And then I think a lot of those people that had their first exposure, like me, to professional wrestling and became fans. And then it became more and more them covering the wrestlers, not just the celebrities.
Yeah, the mainstream coverage, and they were touching all different aspects too. Because I don't know if you were a baseball fan, but Billy Martin was the ring announcer for the main event, the former manager of the New York Yankees. So they were getting, Vince knew what he was doing.
Right.
You get all these different entertainers, and then some sports, New York local sports legends as well. I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. It's all right. So I know I kind of put this into your induction last night, but tell us about your history with Hulk Hogan and how it started.
The first time I met Hulk was before he was with the WWF in those days. Vince had told me, Steve, you need to fly out to Chicago, and I want you to take pictures of the event there. It wasn't a WWF event. And I said, okay, Brian, because at that point, Vince was still friendly with everyone, all the different organizations. So I said, sure, I'll go out there. And he goes, when you get there, give me a call. I said, all right. So I get there and go to a payphone. We don't have cell phones yet. And I call him a call. He goes, all right, the real reason you're there. I go, what? He goes, there's a wrestler named Hulk Hogan. You need to go talk to him. You need to take a picture of him, and I want you to slip him my home phone number and tell him to call me. I go, okay. He goes, but very important, don't let people see you. I was like, okay. I'm in Chicago, so I'm expecting not to come home. So I'm covering the event, and finally you go backstage, and I introduced myself to Hulk, and I said, need to take a couple pictures of you. And he goes, oh, great, no problem. So I take pictures, and I kind of worked my way over to him, and I said, hey, Hulk, I have a Vince McMahon's phone number here, and he wants you to call him tonight. And he looks up at me, and I said, oh, boy, I'm dead. And he said, all right, brother, because just palm it to me when we're done. So I said, okay. So So I took a few more pictures, reached in my pocket, grabbed it. Thank you very much. He slipped, we shook hands, he took the phone number, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yep.
Were you trying to hide from Fern Gagne? You know, he's got the amateur background too.
Everywhere I went, everyone, they were watching me. And like, what is Steve Taylor doing here from Vince's office?
Yeah.
Why is he here? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was closely watched.
Oh my.
Uh-oh.
I know, I just don't think we should speak over it. Lots of ceremonies going on here. I just don't want to take away from that, that's all. Because isn't that like when somebody passes away? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Cheat off your question.
Okay, so in the early 80s, what were your day-to-day WWF responsibilities?
In the 80s, basically, like I said, I started as a photographer. My schedule was basically who we needed pictures of. So I would get the information of all the wrestling cards, and then I would get with the editors and say, all right, who do we need pictures? And with the merchandising people, and I would fly out to those towns to cover the events. If something big was going to happen there, a belt change or a unique matchup, I was definitely there. So I was constantly on the road. It would be flying every day and taking pictures, and then as soon as I get back, I would have to drop the film off at the lab. This is well before digital photography. I'm really
Yes.
jealous of these guys now that
Yeah.
you just take a picture and go, okay,
Yeah.
that one came out good. I would take a picture and I would have to wait till I got back home, drop it off to the lab, get the film developed, everything we did in slides, get it developed, get home and edit it on a light table. And go, oh, that one came out good. Oop, that one didn't. So well before digital photography. And basically my job was to get pictures for the magazine, the program, and then merchandise.
Yeah.
Merchandising was just coming on big then. So anything with a picture of one of the wrestlers on it, they would sell.
Got it. What was your relationship with Vince McMahon like?
I was employee 10 there, so it was a very small company. I mean, there was just, our first offices were in the Cape Cod Coliseum, and it was very casual at that point. 10 of us in the office, and I traveled with Vince on the road in the early days a lot, and he was a nice guy. We enjoyed it. I mean, it was so small. I mean, we wouldn't even have to make reservations for our Christmas party. And as the company grew, it was amazing to watch it grow.
Yeah.
And then I remember one Christmas party, we were all there, and Vince is looking around the room, and he goes, "Do you know half these people?" I go, "Nope." He goes, "I don't either." So it was fun to have that early relationship with him. Because it was a lot more informal in those days. It was great. Yeah, it was quite an experience to have.
Impressive that you were employee number 10. Mr. Finkel was number 1, correct?
Yes, working with Howard was a trip. Howard was, the Fink.
Yeah.
He was the biggest wrestling fan that you ever want to meet. He loved the business. I don't think anyone ever loved this business as much as Howard. And he was the history behind it, too. I mean, if you were trying to come up with something, Howard, when did this happen? Well, just go ask Howard. And
Yeah.
Howard had come right off the top and said, okay, well, that match was at the Rosemont Horizon, and then he would automatically have that information right there for you. He was awesome.
He was a great man. Howard would co-host the Hall of Fame ceremony. He would put in the names like yourself and people that had done bigger and better. And I would do the local talent, and then Howard was sick. Kind of kayfabed everybody and just said Howard had another commitment, but he physically could not be there. And then when he passed, I ended up doing it myself. But he was always very, very good to me.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, he treated me like one of the boys.
Yeah.
Like I went to a signing he was doing, and I brought my son. And he goes, "Whatever you want, no charge." He said, "Mr. Palladino's a part of the fraternity." I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," and we became pretty good friends.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think I had a question about Howard later, but that was some good memories. WrestleMania 2 in 1986. So you had New York, Chicago, L.A. Which location were you shooting at?
I think I was in Chicago for the Battle Royal there.
Yeah.
That was kind of a weird WrestleMania because,
Yeah.
especially being a photographer or anyone in production, we were split up 3 different ways. First time, I think the only time they've ever done that, right?
Yeah.
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 It was, but it didn't have the same feel as WrestleMania 1, but it was starting to build with a fan base, which was the good thing for it.
1986.
It became a tradition.
Yeah, in 1986, it was like new concept or something for wrestling.
Right.
I watched that on closed circuit. I watched that on a screen at the Boston Garden.
Wow.
1 and 2. I bought a ticket and looked up at a big screen, like where the ring would be up above, and I watched 1 and 2. 3, we got pay-per-view. So that was new technology. So WrestleMania 3, what are your personal memories?
WrestleMania 3, I think that's when we first got the feeling like, wow, this thing is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, to have the crowd there that big, that people would want to be part of the event, even the people way up in the nosebleed section where, I mean, you didn't have a great view of the ring, but you were part of the event. You know? I think that was like people saying, well, I was at Woodstock, but I couldn't see the stage and couldn't hear the music, but I was at Woodstock. I think WrestleMania 3 had that. We were all pretty impressed. It was fun for us when I was just starting at that point getting into the production of the WWE. I was working my way from photographer back into production, and we had a chance to go up on the roof of the Silverdome because we had to check the rigging points. So I was with our production people. I said, "Want to go up the roof?" I go, "Oh yeah." So we actually got a chance to walk on the Silverdome roof. I mean, it's just basic. It's Teflon. It's like that thick, and you realize, wow, that's all between me and that whole distance down there. And you could open up the little vents there to check what you were doing, and the air would blow up there, and you actually got a chance to sign in. There's a air vent up there, and if you've ever walked in the roof, you got a chance to sign it. Oh, and I remember I grew up in Syracuse, New York, which has a dome, and I said, well, I'm going to sign this to the Silverdome, the second best dome in the country, Steve.
Wow.
That's
unbelievable.
That was cool. That was ringside. I think when Vince walked out and welcomed the crowd, I think I got goosebumps. I think we all did because I was taking pictures, but I was also going,
Yeah.
is this really happening? Is that many people? That was the first time I think everyone was like, whoa, how big can this get?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Only
that's awesome.
93,000, and now it's a 2-night event, drawing like 80,000 a night. It's insane.
It is crazy what it's come to. It really is. And WrestleMania itself is its own creature.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, like we did WrestleMania, it was not WrestleMania 1, it was WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And then by 2, and like you said, I don't even know what they're up to now. It's amazing the event it has. People coming from worldwide, everywhere. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think next year's 40, so I just know I'm getting older when I remember WrestleMania 1, and here we are still rolling along. So give me some memories of Andre the Giant.
Andre, he was a tough guy to get to know because I think Andre kept pretty much close to himself. But once he got to know you, I mean, you were in with him. And he called everyone boss. And I got a chance to know him with pictures and slowly develop a relationship with him. And then where it got to the point where, you check into a hotel and you try to sneak in and you walk by the bar and Andre would go, "Hey, boss, come on over and have a drink." And then you're done for the night.
Yeah.
And because he would just sit there and, I mean, the stories of how much the guy could drink and not be drunk were legendary.
Yeah.
And I think my funniest story with Andre was we were up in Montreal. He owned a restaurant up in Montreal. And so we said, well, let's do a picture page. Let's go do some pictures of him up in the restaurant. So we did. And then he, got us all dinner. And he ordered for me, and he ordered frog legs. And I go, I'm good. He goes, no. Try the frog legs. I go, no, I'm good. I'm not going to eat frog legs. And pretty soon you get, boss, eat the frog legs. Tastes like chicken. So I had to sit there and eat these frog legs. Of course, you're not going to say no to a 7'4" giant.
No, did
And
they
actually,
taste like chicken?
They did taste like chicken. They weren't that bad. But I have never ordered them since, so I have not. So.
Oh my God!
But it was awesome. And then we did get a chance to do a photo shoot down at Andre's house, and that was amazing for a couple of reasons. For one, when you walk in the house, everything is built for a giant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the chairs, the countertops, the bathrooms, the doorways, everything is meant for him to be comfortable. It's like a normal person going to an elementary school. You sit down at the little desk and you're like, you feel so huge. Well, I felt so small in Andre's house.
I bet.
Just walking around. But it was fun to watch Andre at that point be himself. And he had no one bothering him, no pressures, no outside. He was Andre. He wasn't Andre the Giant. He was Andre the person. And he had so much fun. He was riding around in his four-wheeler.
I was just going to ask you, because that's the first thing that popped in my mind. It was like Andre in a tank top riding like a...
Yep. I took that picture of him, and I'll never forget it. I mean, it was fun to watch him be relaxed.
Yeah.
And because I think his life was tough. I mean, everywhere he went, it was tough to be a giant.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, walking through an airport, I mean, people, even if I don't know how you wouldn't know Andre the Giant, but seeing this guy 7'4", I mean, it was tough for him. I mean, to go everywhere. I mean, to sit even in first class, to sit with that body and fly all over the country and get into a taxi cab or a limo. It was tough. But to see him on his ranch, that was a memory I'll always have him. He was an awesome man. He really was.
As soon as you started talking about that, I immediately thought of him on that ATV.
Yep.
Since we just did memories of Andre and we talked about Howard, how about some memories of Gorilla Monsoon?
Gorilla Monsoon was one of those people that you had so much respect for, because he not only was a wrestler, he was an agent, he was a promoter, and just a nice guy. He was one of those people that early on accepted us into the business. I mean, that was the biggest problem Ed and I had, Ed Holinsky and myself, that we were brought in, we were employees of Vince. We weren't from a wrestling magazine. We were from Vince's magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And Vince wanted us in on everything. And, you talk about kayfabe. This is back when it was a big kayfabe, and they didn't like us being in the locker room. The boys didn't accept us. They didn't want us there. They didn't want us to be there. Guys like Chief J. Strongbow would kick us out all the time. And I would go up to him and say, well, Chief, I want to know about this. He goes, you don't need to know that. I go, well, Vince wants me to know the best and what we're going to do. He goes, well, you can tell Vince to. And I go, well, I can't tell him that. And so I would go back and talk to Vince, and he goes, how'd it go? Well, I was talking to Chief, and he wasn't too happy. He goes, what'd he say? Well, he told you to go. He did.
Oh, God.
But Monsoon was the one that knew the business, and he goes, wait a minute. These guys are working for Vince just like I am. They need to know what's going on. They need to have access to the talent for pictures and stories. And he was the one that actually helped us become insiders, which was nice, because it's a tough business. You know that. It's a tough business.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely. So you hit talking about you were working Vince's magazine, WWF's magazine.
Right.
At that point, and this is just from my knowledge, were regular photographers from wrestling magazines barred from ringside? Because I noticed like the shots seem to be like from the crowd now. So was that when the magazine started, hey, we don't want PWI and Wrestling All-Stars and all these guys in
Right.
there?
Yeah, when I first started, like I said, my first day on the job was at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
You know, it's at the mecca of professional wrestling. We were actually starting the office the next day, and Vince said, "Hey, on the way down, and stop at Madison Square Garden, and we have an event there." I said, "This is my first day on the job at Madison Square Garden," and it was only the second time I had ever been at Madison Square Garden. I went there once as a news photographer when Syracuse basketball, who I would cover Syracuse basketball, was in the NIT finals. They lost. But it was thrilled to be at Madison Square Garden. I go, wow, this is Madison Square Garden. So my first day of the job as a photographer, I'm in Madison Square Garden. But I'm also surrounded by other photographers. I mean, Bill Apter and George Napolitano,
Yes.
all those guys. I mean, these guys were the legends in photography. And they were very helpful to me. And so we had a whole crowd of people, all the Japanese photographers there. But then as Vince started slowly taking over the territories and starting his own magazine, Vince says, well, why am I letting these guys have it? So
Right.
they basically were barred from ringside, and I was the exclusive photographer. And put a lot of pressure on me. But, you know, the guys like George and Bill, they knew what was going on. They didn't hold it against me personally. They, you know, and they slowly started letting the Japanese photographers in, and then Bill and George finally started moving back in. But Vince, I mean, he's a good businessman. You know, if I've got your own magazine, I want my photographer ringside. I want the exclusive photos. And if you want to, you know, see what's going on in the WWF, you're going to buy my magazine.
Yeah.
It's good marketing.
Yeah.
As always.
Without a doubt. Do you enjoy studio shoots or shooting at ringside more?
Well, when I first started, as I said, I was a news photographer, and so I loved covering big events. I covered presidential campaigns. I was on the photography team down at Watkins Glen for all the Grand Prix races and all that stuff. So I covered all the big news events. I loved covering wrestling events. Studio photography was something I really had never done before. And then during my interview, like I said, I had lunch with Vince and talked about 2 hours. And Vince says, you know how to do studio, right, pal? Oh, yeah, no problem. I know how to do studio. Goes, okay, that's a big part of the job. I said, okay. Well, I had never taken a studio picture in my life. So when I accepted the job, the first thing I did, go to the bookstore and buy those, you know, studio photography for idiots books and how to shoot that, and then I got to learn how to do this fast. And so luckily, I learned on the job too. It was fun, but it was a little awkward for me at first. But then the more and more I got into it, and as the company grew, I started doing more studio photography, and that's when Tom Buchanan, who actually used to work for me at the newspaper, I don't know if a lot of people know that I hired Tom out of college to work at the newspaper with me. And then when I left for the WWF, Tom took over my job. But at that point, I started doing more and more studios, and then I enjoyed doing it because I could be creative with it. You know, it wasn't just a controlled environment of an event. I controlled the environment. And I had a lot of fun with it. I mean, one story in the early days, which I can think of, was Sergeant Slaughter, when we were making him the great American hero. And Vince wanted all these pictures of him. So I had set up a studio, and because our studio stuff was done on the road. It wasn't done in a beautiful photo studio. It was done on the road. So we were in Allentown or Hamburg. You'd be in a hallway with a backdrop and a couple of lights. I remember one day I'm taking a picture of Slaughter. He's got his hat on, you know, his mirrored sunglasses, and he's going like this. And I had this American flag over here, and Vince walks by me and goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "What?" He goes, "We're trying to make Slaughter the great American hero. You've got this American flag over here. You've got Slaughter over here. Don't you think you ought to use it for a background?" And I said, "Vince, come here for a second." I said, "Look in the lens." He looks over, and there's Slaughter with the chrome glasses on, with the American flag reflected in his glasses. And he goes, "Okay, pal." Tell you what, you do your job, I do my job. And he walked away. And it was one of my favorite pictures.
Yeah.
We did a lot of pictures, of course, with the flag. But that was one that was a chance to start to be creative with stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun.
That's very cool. All right, I think this next question may be for the production staff that gave me these, but tell us in detail about your experience working with the Goonies cast.
That was a lot of fun. Early on, when Cyndi Lauper started to get involved with wrestling, she and her boyfriend manager Dave Wolf, they were big wrestling fans. So they had a ball doing it. They grew up watching wrestling. They were marks, you know.
Yeah.
They had so much fun, and I got to know Dave Wolf very well, and he would include me in everything they did, you know. So we got to spend a lot of time hanging out with Cyndi. I mean, even my wife and I, we went out to dinner with them and get pictures of her holding our baby, and they sent presents and stuff. It was just a lot of fun. And then when she did the movies, the video for the Goonies, Dave insisted I come on and be the photographer for it. And that was a thrill.
Yeah.
That was just so much fun. I mean, at that point, though, the Goonies was just a movie that was coming out. Who would know that, you know, 40 years later, it would still be a classic that my kids and my grandkids watch, you know? So we had more fun on the set of that because they had a whole, I mean, Lou Albano was there, Andre, Freddie Blassie,
Nikolai
Volkov.
Sheik.
Sheik. And it was the first time that they were kind of out of character a bit and having fun. And it was a full movie set. We did
Some Roddy Piper there too?
Roddy Piper was there. I mean,
Damn.
I can't remember all the people. And the kids, the Goonies themselves, were still on the set. And they were having more fun with the wrestlers. They were hanging out, and they're like fans. I mean, here's the guys, these kids who are the stars of this movie, and they're in the background watching it and having fun and hanging out with people. That was a very enjoyable time. I enjoyed that. It's great memories, especially now that the movie The Goonies is. I mean, it's a cult classic.
Yeah.
It really is. We never knew that at the time.
That's crazy. Who are your top 5 to be around backstage?
I'm sorry, who's the top 5 for?
Top 5 to be around, I'd assume any talent.
Backstage?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I did a lot of stuff with Hulk. It seemed that as Hulkamania became bigger and bigger, his demands for him to make personal appearances were all over the place. I mean, the Tonight Show, any award show, and of course, Vince would send me with him. So if Hulk was doing this, doing that, I would go there. In fact, it kind of became a kind of an inside joke for Hulk and myself that, you know, we were on the road together doing wrestling matches, but then on our days off, we would be somewhere else. And so it became the joke with Hulk and I, well, looks like another day off for us, brother. And we would be doing stuff. And it was fun. And then there was a lot of photo shoots with the Hulk. I got to know him as a person. I remember once I was going down to Tampa, and I was going to do a photo shoot at his house. And I said, you know, where do you want me to meet you? He goes, I'll always pick you up at the airport. I said, all right. So what time's your flight? So I get my bags and everything, and I give him a call on his cell, and he pulls up in front of the airport and gets out of the car, you know, shakes my hand, grabs my bags, and puts them in the trunk. But at that point, all the people around there, oh my gosh, there's Hulk Hogan. There's Hulk Hogan. So he gets surrounded by people, and then finally we break away, and I start laughing. He goes, what are you laughing at? And I said, well, you know, all those people, you know, they're all your fans, right? And they don't know who I am, but you think any of them are wondering why Hulk Hogan would pick this guy up at the airport, pick up his bags and put him in the trunk himself? I go, you probably don't know who I am, but they're probably wondering, who is that guy?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I mean, other people I enjoyed, Jesse Ventura. I spent a lot of time with Jesse. And he was just one of those guys that's very likable, and spent a lot of time backstage hanging out, and just being a normal person. And it was fun going back to Minnesota when he was the governor, and seeing him as the governor, and it's just like, wow, Jesse, you're the governor. He goes, yeah. It's kind of unreal, isn't it? I go, yeah, it is. Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart was probably one of the easiest to work with, because most of the guys, you're trying to schedule them to take pictures, and it's tough. I mean, these guys are traveling all the time. They've got their matches, they've got their interviews. They don't want to go spend an hour with a photographer. But Jimmy Hart was the opposite. Jimmy Hart would bug me. You know, he'd see me go, hey, Stevie, what are we doing today? Well, who do you need? Can we do this picture? Hey, I was thinking about that picture. He would constantly bug me to take pictures. Yeah. What a dream to work with. Yeah. To have someone that wanted their picture taken, and that, you know, hey, let's do it with Rougeau. So he would gather them up for me and make sure they were, you know, had their right outfits on and stuff. He was awesome. Yeah. And just one of the hardest working people in the business, right there, Jimmy Hart.
He's still grinding. It's incredible.
Yeah.
What are your top 3 venues to be at? I'd assume to shoot pictures.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What's your top 3 venues to be at?
Top 3.
Like MSG, Boston Garden?
I think MSG, obviously, for one. I mean, that's the mecca of professional wrestling. I mean, it was always the main show for the McMahons. They were the New York office. You always had the biggest crowds. They had the best cards. And that was one of the arenas that you were just thrilled to be in there. You know, Madison Square Garden, which is pretty ironic. Like I said, it was my first day on the job. And I would later end up working at Madison Square Garden. I was, after I left the WWE, Madison Square Garden found out that I was available, and they were like, wow, come in. I got to know all the people there, and they knew I knew my production work, and they hired me. And so I ended up spending 13 years as, first of all, director of production there, and then vice president of production. So,
oh, wow.
And even after there for like 13 years, I'd still walk in there in the morning and like in an empty arena and go, wow, this is Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Boston Garden. I mean, the old one.
Yeah. The balcony that hung down.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's funny, they were talking about the smoke-filled one. Oh, I remember. You're walking in. It was terrible for pictures because everyone was smoking in those days. Your clothes smelled.
Yeah.
The pictures looked like there were clouds in the back. But that also had the excitement of Madison Square Garden. The Boston crowds were fanatics.
And sometimes the fights in the crowd amongst the fans were better than what was going on in the ring.
Oh yeah, I mean it was crazy. I mean you had to be careful if people were throwing things and yelling and screaming, but the fans were amazing there.
Yeah.
And then going back to in the L.A. I mean even the old Olympic Auditorium in the Kiel in St. Louis. I mean, I had a chance back in the 80s to see some of those arenas that are no longer there. But there's some classic ones. I mean, Providence Civic Center. Loved going there. It was always rocking. And another one where the fans were, they're more tame. I mean, more polite than I think the Boston people, but they were rabid fans. It was fun. And when you've got your back to, I'm ringside, I'm taking pictures, the fans are on the back. You feed off their excitement, you can feel them loving every minute of it.
Yeah. Let's see. What is your favorite moment that you captured in a photo?
Favorite moment I captured? I don't know. There's so many of them. That's a hard one. It really is. I think any of the WrestleManias, where there was a belt change.
Yeah.
And Hulk, slamming Andre the Giant. I mean, it's a classic moment right there. There's too many of them to narrow it down, but I saw some amazing matches, and like I said, last night, I have so much respect for the talent. These guys do this night in and night out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they do it, and they're just the greatest athletes, but they're the greatest entertainers too.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, even watching them do promos and give speeches like last night,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all coming off the top of their head. I've got my written notes and I'm
Yeah.
reading it. I don't do this for a living, and I'm reading my notes. These guys are just up there talking,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. I mean, the utmost respect for anyone that's ever stepped into the square circle. It's amazing.
As do I. And you just said belt change at one point, and refresh my memory. I'm going off the script here, but when Macho Man took the Intercontinental title from Tito Santana in Boston, and he had the gimmick in his hand, didn't you have it? Am I remembering
Yes, well,
correctly?
I was fairly new at that point too, so I didn't even know what's going on. But it's funny you mentioned it, because I saw the video of that, and I go, oh my gosh, that's me. That when he had the
Yeah.
object and he throws it over, it almost hits me, and I pick it up, and I think one of the announcers goes, I think the photographer has got that over it. I go, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't in on this, so I was like,
Yeah.
what do I do with it? I kind of put it in my bag, but it's funny you should mention that, because that's a great memory. It really
That'd be
was.
something great to sell out at the Fan Fest if you still had that. That's pretty
Oh, no,
amazing.
that would be a great memorabilia to have.
I was there. I'm a Boston guy, so I mean, I remember just Macho Man was a heel,
Oh, yeah.
but the pop when
Oh.
he won, and the fact that we got a title change. Now,
Yes.
granted, those were being filmed for Nesson, so at least there was, we knew we had TV, but we never got title changes. That was a special night. But I always remember that with you with the,
I think that's the first time I ever appeared on camera.
yeah. Flowing locks, if I remember correctly. How different was it working for the WWF in the 80s compared to the 2000s?
Is that what's it?
How different was it working in the WWF in the 80s compared to the 2000s?
In the 80s, it was a small company. In 2000, it was a big corporation. It was a lot of fun in the 80s. I mean, in the early days, we didn't know if this thing was going to last. I mean, the company was growing. They were going through growing pains. They were overextending themselves. Vince had these great big ideas. I want to do this, I want to do that. And the financial people are probably going, Vince, what are we doing here? But it was the unknown then. Would this work? I mean, can he pull it off? Will we still have a job in a couple of weeks? And if it doesn't work, the 2000s, it was more of a well-oiled machine at that point. The TV values were going up. I mean, there more production, more entrances in music and pyro and all that stuff. It was a huge difference. I'm just so glad that I was there in the 80s to experience that,
Yeah.
the golden age. Because you look at it now, I mean, we were just a ring and a one truck, and TV shows, when I was there, it was like 12, 13, 14 trucks. I mean, who knows how many trucks there are now? It's a huge production, a very slick production, and with some of the best values of any sports. I mean, it's amazing what they do there. The editing and the TV is awesome.
Who was the most entertaining and witty backstage?
I think Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan, anytime you talk to Bobby, it would be constant jokes. I mean, he would just come up with stuff at the top of his head, and constantly funny. And then all of a sudden, he'd just start talking, and you're going, am I missing a joke? And it's going over my head because he's not funny. But I think he was the wittiest of people, and that's why I think the team of Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby playing off of each other, you know,
Yeah.
where Gorilla would get mad at him, you know, and call him a weasel. All that stuff, it wasn't scripted. It was Bobby off the top of his
Amazing
head.
chemistry.
I don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Monsoon played the perfect straight man. And all the people Bobby managed, I mean, they didn't have to say too much because, you know, he would just lead it. You know?
Bobby would go off, and Gorilla just tell him, "Would you stop?"
Yep.
I mean, it's gold. Nobody's ever been able to replicate that. We know Joe's a big photo guy, so who was responsible for choosing who got a promo photo?
I think that was pretty much the photo editors and the people in the promotion department saying, hey, so-and-so's got a promotion coming up. In the early days, we were just trying to build up a file, so we would shoot everyone. 'Cause we had, when I started, I was the first photographer there, so we had no files. I mean, everything that we covered was done by other photographers, so we had 0 photo files. So at that point, we were shooting everyone. But we would get assignments all the time from promotion to the magazine people, hey, we need studio pictures of this, studio picture of that, and then we would try to track them down, go to their event and shoot them.
So for those that don't know, what is a promo photo used for?
A promo photo basically was just their signature shot. It would be anything that they would use for promotional stuff. They would use the newspapers. I mean, when the photos first came out, they were used for newspapers. So the publicity department would send out and say, hey, WWF is coming to town. Here's a stock photo of it. And then more and more, and I think at that point, they got a life of their own, that people started not only looking at them, but collecting them. And that's the thing I was amazed at, you know, when I first met Joe. He was telling me the history of the promo photos, and I didn't know it was that many people collected them.
Yeah.
And people started talking about, do you remember this photo and that photo? And they would show me photos, and I would actually have to, you know, online blow it up and go, did I take that picture? I don't remember that one because we took so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, on any given night, I would have, you know, 5 or 6 different people in the studio a night. You know, and 4 nights, so you had 20 people in a week.
Did you ever envision it being such a big collectible piece now, like those photos? And
No, I didn't. And then it's unfortunate, too, because my mom, who I talked about, you know, she was my biggest fan. I would send out pictures to my mom. My mom and dad had a dollhouse shop in upstate New York. They were the largest dealer of dollhouses and miniatures, and they would have these huge customers. And they would stop in and visit the store. And my mom goes, are you a wrestling fan? And most of them were. And so she would give them photos. Oh, let me give you this. So I would send up, you know, 10, 20 pictures at a time and in boxes of photos. And she would just pass them out like candy.
yeah,
So everyone that bought something, they would walk away with all these photos. And she had stacks of them that she gave away. And looking back on it, I go, wow.
you know what those
My
are worth.
mom would die to know that, you know, yeah, that photo sells for $50 now. That one sells for $100. That's an original
Yeah.
one. My mom would never believe that all those photos she gave away. She gave
Oh,
away
my God.
thousands of dollars of photos, but it was fun.
I know Joe's head's spinning somewhere right now hearing
And
that.
you know, and I give the credit to my wife for saving so many of them because, you know, we had every time a new picture would come out, you know, the promotion department would give me like 20 of them, you know, and I'd take them home and I'd send some to my mom and they'd try to have them on the road with me. So if we saw someone, we could give them to them. So we had magazines and stuff. And luckily my wife, Angie, she saved a lot of those. And when I first met Joe and he goes, you have any promo photos hanging around the house? And I go, I don't know, I'll have to go look. And then I talked to my wife, she goes, yeah, I've got a bunch of them. We dug them out through the files, and they're like, whoa, it's like finding buried treasure. And then when my dad passed away, we found tons of them at his house that, you know, that he had saved, and he had saved all my stuff, and I inherited a lot of my old photos.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was great.
That's
I
unreal.
didn't think, when we were taking them, we didn't think they'd be worth anything at
Yeah.
that point.
Any funny promo shoot stories behind the scenes?
They all were fun. I mean, it's just like anything. I think the outtakes, I mean, the WWE has all my outtakes and stuff in a file maybe somewhere, I don't know. But, I mean, when I would edit at home, I would edit my slides. So I would sit there on the couch, and usually one of the kids are hanging out, and I would sit there with my little loop and look at each picture, and that one's good, that one, and then I'd throw the other one on the floor, and at the end of the night, we'd clean them up. And every now and then, there'd be some really funny ones, because you're doing test shots, and the guys are making funny faces
Sure.
at me and stuff like that, and just being goofy. I don't know where all those photos are. I don't know if the WWF saved them, because at those point, you know, they weren't going to publish them. So I don't know whether they ever got saved or not. But
Could make a book out of
yeah,
that.
that would be an awesome book of the outtakes of all the photographers, all their outtakes.
All right, we're going to get into some more specific. Why did some photos have P numbers and many didn't?
Not a clue.
There it is.
I didn't even know they were P numbers until Joe pointed it out to me. I did not know that. And the original ones all said for newspaper use only. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then I had to argue with Vince about getting photo credit. That was a big thing, was Vince didn't like photographers getting photo credit. But I insisted on it, and,
Yeah.
and he was like, put up with it. But they always had my photo credit, but how the P series started, I don't know if that was someone in the photo department or promotion department trying to become organized. Like, all right, how do we got 5 pictures of Hulk. They're not numbered, but
Right.
maybe they came up with the number. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. And why were most early 80s promos black and white and some were color?
I think it's just for the simple fact that they were newspaper use. So back then, newspapers were using stuff in black and white, and they would reproduce better in a newspaper. I mean, everything, probably at least 90% of our stuff was shot in the early days in color. I don't remember shooting much black and white. So anything we shot was all in color, and it was all done in slides. It was not done on print film. Like I said, it wasn't digital. They're all done in slides. So, and then at that point, they would have to convert it over to black and white. But I think that was the reason that it was for promotional use.
All right, we're going to get real granular now. What determined if a promo photo would be 8 by 10 or 8.5 by 11?
Another not a clue.
I had a feeling we were going that way. And why did some superstars never get a promo photo?
I think at that point it was driven by the promotional department and the magazine. I mean, who they wanted to push and who they needed shots of. I think that was probably the reason that if the promotional department had a reason that they wanted to, if they were writing a news article about this person and they wanted to send a photo, they would request a photo. And if someone wasn't getting a push, and nothing personal to anyone, but
So there's another one. Why did several black and white promos have Kodak on back but color didn't? Why did several black and white promo photos have Kodak on the back but color did not?
wow.
I don't know.
I think you have to ask one of the photo editors about that one too, how they were printed. Basically, we would send all our stuff into the photo editors. We would do our rough edit first, and take out all the embarrassing ones, the out of focus ones, and throw them away. And then we would send the good ones to them, and they would keep a file, and then they would edit it from there. And I think whoever was ordering the pictures would do that, whether they wanted color or black and white, and whatever vendor they were using. To tell you the truth, I didn't even know some of them say Kodak on the back.
Yeah.
You know, some of them say Kodak on the back. I have to look now.
I'm telling you.
I say I have learned more from Joe about the promo photos by talking to him. They know more about it than I do.
See that, Joe Bruin, you're teaching a photographer about photography and pictures and promo
Right.
photos. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
So this might be another I don't know, but why did the P numbers stop after Natalia's promo?
Not a clue.
Okay, I don't even know.
Not a clue.
I got nothing on that. We talked about some other luminaries in your time with WWF. I want to ask you your memories of a gentleman that's in our New England Hall of Fame, Mr. Ed Cohen.
Ed Cohen. I don't know what number Ed was, probably number 3 or 4 in there. Ed was the booker at that point, and Ed was an amazing man. He got to know all the arena managers. He put these tours together, and I became personal friends with Ed, and I just enjoyed working with him so much.
Yeah.
He was booking's a pretty tough thing to do, and Ed took a lot of heat from all of us, including me, especially when I was starting to take over production and stuff, because Vince would want these towns, I want this town, and Ed would have to book it. Well, what available dates do you have? So we were always on Ed's case on how far the drive was, especially if we're doing a TV show where we're not finishing up until 2 in the morning when the trucks leave, and it has a 7 a.m. load in. You can't have a 6-hour drive. And so we'd always argue with Ed, anybody, I have to book these buildings. But Ed would put these tours together. I mean, it was like magic of just, and the boys appreciated it when it all made sense, but
Yeah.
there's times when it couldn't. I mean, you might go from here to here, back to here to go back to there, but that was Ed's job.
Yeah.
And I actually, my department fell under Ed for a while, and he was a wonderful boss and just a wonderful person. He was a joy to work with, and definitely someone that I think was behind the scenes that I don't think people realize what he did.
Yeah.
He was a big part of the success of the WWF.
Yeah, I got to meet him when he was here. He was a very,
Yeah.
very nice man. So now let's kind of wrap up. We're going to play the name game. So
Okay.
I'll give you a name. You can give me a quick a word, a comment, whatever.
Okay.
Tom Buchanan.
Tom, like I said, I hired Tom right out of high school. I mean, right out of college when he was working at the Citizen with me. And Tom and I worked side by side at the newspaper. And then as the WWF grew, I couldn't cover every event. And so I would have to have someone else help me. So I said, hey, Tom, you want to do some freelance work? And so Tom, I mean, I knew he was an awesome photographer. And so Tom was my first choice. And then as we kept growing and growing and growing, and then sooner or later, I was growing out of photography, and I needed to pull someone on full time, and Tom was my first choice. I mean, Tom's awesome photographer. He's also much better at speaking and with the fans than I am. He loves doing that. He's great.
How about Roy London?
Roy was one of the freelancers. He mostly worked with Tom a lot. Another good photographer. I mean, he was around for years and just did a lot of freelance with us. It was great.
Jim Johnston?
Jim Johnston. I mean, a lot of people don't know who Jim Johnston is, but he's the guy that wrote so much of the music. It was amazing. The guy was very creative. He would take a talent, find out about their personality, and develop an entrance, and then record it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite an art. I mean, it was amazing. He was awesome.
How about Mr. T?
That was a classic. I mean, when we started doing stuff with Mr. T, we got a chance to hang out with him a lot. And I went out to dinner with him, with Vince, and a few times. And another person I got to know behind the scenes. I mean, but he was always Mr. T.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a character on TV, but it was pretty close to the character in real life.
Yeah, that's great. How about Sean Mooney?
Sean Sean was awesome. Sean was one of the first people that I think looked and talked and had the talent of a mainstream news announcer. I mean, you could picture Sean doing the weather or doing a news report. Really classy, nice guy. I enjoyed working with him.
How about Rhode Island native, no longer with us, Tim White?
Tim White. I first met Tim, it was when he was on a ring crew, and him and Mike Breen, they were a ring crew. Two of the funniest guys you ever want to hang around. They just made a hard job fun. These guys they would pull in, and after traveling 6 or 7 hours and no sleep, just big smiles on their face, and just they just loved the job. I loved hanging out with Tim. He was awesome with Andre, and I told the story about going to Australia with Tim. It was we did the vignettes for Outback Jack.
Oh, yeah.
They for some reason, probably to save money, they sent Tim and I down there, so I could take still pictures and produce it, and Tim could help with the handle of the talent. So it was just the two of us. So
Yeah.
it was a pretty cheap trip for going away to Australia, and Tim and I had a ball. We
Yeah.
called it Mr. Tim and Mr. Steve, and we did a little funny video at the end of it for Vince, and telling Vince that what we did, and we're dressed in shorts and t-shirts, but we put ties on. And it's like, Vince says, company policy, we got our ties on. And Tim, I don't ever remember seeing Tim in a bad mood or angry or anyone didn't like him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was awesome.
Yeah.
I missed him.
How about Bill Apter?
Bill, I was brought in to be a competitor of Bill. I mean, Bill had all the magazines, and he was a legend. I mean, his magazines and other photographers like George Napolitano, those guys were doing this years before I'd even been to my first one. So I just had a lot of respect for those guys. And when I first came in, I mean, I was an outsider. I mean, these guys, all of a sudden, Vince was forcing me onto these into the arenas and taking pictures and taking over their job, but they never held it against me. I mean, Bill was always a real professional, and he understood the business side of it, and he was always there if I had questions, about someone's character or what they did. I always felt comfortable going to Bill for advice. So I mean, it was really awesome to be able to hang out with him, because those guys are, talking about legendary photographers. Bill's a real legend in this business.
Absolutely. Another legend. How about Captain Lou Albano?
I don't think there's any, as he says, often imitated, never duplicated. That's true. I mean, Lou was funny. Lou was just a funny guy. He would just go off the handle all the time.
Yep.
He was awesome to photograph. I mean, he's such a character. I mean, the stuff we did with him and Cyndi Lauper, and no wonder Cyndi picked Lou to be part of her videos. I mean, he was wonderful to deal with. He's just one of those guys that's always funny.
Yeah.
Yep.
Joey Morella.
What's up?
Joey Morella, Gorilla's son.
Joey Morella was a ring crew and referee, and that in the early days when I was just starting to take over that stuff. I mean, with Gino's son, and just a real top professional. I mean, he was a young kid, and he really knew his stuff, and it was sad when he passed away. I mean, Joey was well liked by everyone and well respected by him. Yep.
How about Bret the Hitman Hart?
Bret was awesome. I always enjoyed watching and photographing Bret, because you knew you had some good action there. The guy was so awesome in the ring. He had great matches with everybody. So you knew if you were taking pictures of a Bret Hart match, you were going to get some good pictures.
Yeah.
And as a person, I loved him. I mean, he was great. I went up to their house and took pictures of Bret. We went up into Alaska and Calgary and all those places and did a lot of great photo shoots, and very photogenic. And he knew his gimmick. He knew who Bret Hart was, and he knew who the fans wanted, so it really helped me portray that in pictures.
And how about his brother Owen?
Owen, all the stories you hear about Owen in all his practical jokes and how much that Owen would lighten up the room when he walked in were true.
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of those guys who just had fun. He made it fun. He was just all practical jokes all the time. And it was sad, and we miss him. But he was an awesome wrestler, but also an awesome person.
Yeah, absolutely. How about Mean Gene Okerlund?
Mean Gene was another one of those people who I was just amazed at how quickly he could come up with stuff, his ad libs, and how well that when he's working with a talent, he could bring their personality out. You know, and no one had a bad interview with Mean Gene. He was just so much fun. I remember once I was taking pictures of Gene in the studio, and I was there with my wife, and my daughter was just born, and Gene's out there and brings her on the set, you know, and he's holding her, and he's talking about, and her name's Jessie. He goes, "Were you named after Jessie, the body of Ventura?" She's like this, like this. And then Gene goes, "Oh, Steve Taylor, where's your daughter?" "Well, I think she needs a diaper change." It was she didn't, but
Sure.
very embarrassing for her now to watch that interview because she's 30 and with kids of her own. But Gene was so awesome just to watch him, the magic there of watching him create stuff from nothing.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's awesome. A couple more as we wrap up here. Morton Downey Jr.
I didn't do much with them. I think that was more of a Tom Buchanan question. I mean,
Okay.
those days, Tom was pretty much doing more of the promotional stuff than I was.
How about Regis Philbin?
Regis was a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah.
And he was fun. He was a neighbor of Vince's, and we would go to parties at Vince's house for Christmas parties, and Regis would be there and hang out. But Regis, he was a fan. You could tell he was a fan. He enjoyed it, and the boys always enjoyed being on a show with him.
How about the WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation?
Yeah. I kind of got pulled into that when Vince decided to do a bodybuilding thing, and I wasn't a bodybuilding photographer. I mean, obviously I wasn't a bodybuilder myself. And so we relied a lot on there was a couple of photographers who were professional bodybuilding photographers. I learned a lot from those guys, and they were very helpful because being a full-time WWF photographer, I had to shoot a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
And they were more worried about what their bodies looked like instead of their faces or their gimmicks or stuff. So I had to do a completely different type of photography. So it was a good learning experience for me. And the first bodybuilding event they had, it was fascinating. It was interesting.
So speaking of bodybuilding and fitness, how about Ico Pro?
I never was on Ico Pro.
No.
In fact, like I said, I wasn't a bodybuilder. I'm trying to remember who was the guy that was the head of that, and Ico Pro. I took a picture when we were joking around once, and I was taking a picture of him holding an Ico Pro, and he's posing. And I got a picture of Frosted Flakes, and I'm holding it here, the two of us. Very funny picture. I was more of a Frosted Flakes guy than an Ico Pro.
All right, I got three more for the name game. I think we had a good talk about Jimmy Hart earlier.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy's awesome.
Three more, no longer with us. Yokozuna.
Yokozuna. Another one of those just larger-than-life characters. He was, I mean, the guy's just his physical presence was huge, but his personality was too. He was really a nice guy to work with. I mean, and he was another guy that people had fun with. He coming from a wrestling family, and and he got a nice push, and it was great to watch him. But he was another guy that's fun to be around.
Yeah. How about the Macho Man, Randy Savage?
Macho Man, what a character. I mean, yeah. I mean, how can you talk about Macho Man and not go, yeah, and start to imitate him? Randy was so intense, constantly on, constantly in character, and we were honored that when Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth got married, in pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden, that Macho Man, he knew my wife, he knew my kids, and he goes, would they like to be in the wedding? Oh, wow. I said, oh, yeah. So I went to my daughter, and I said, Macho Man, Miss Elizabeth, would like you to be in the wedding as a flower girl. She was one of the 2 flower girls. And I said, really? So you want to do this? I go, Jess, now, this is Madison Square Garden, live television, pay-per-view, worldwide. It's huge. Are you up for it? And she goes, well, Dad, I did a dance rehearsal at Danbury High School once. I go, not quite the same thing, but,
Close.
She did it. And my son was the ring bearer. His basic question was, does it pay anything?
Smart kid.
Smart kid. And it did, and we put it away for him. But it's funny, to this day, my son and my daughter, they're all both grown now, and every now and then that would come up with one of their friends, and especially my daughter's husband will bring it up because, my wife Jess, she was in Macho Man's wedding. She was, and my daughter would go, oh boy, here it comes. Yeah. That's something they'll live with forever. It was just a lot of fun. But I loved working with Macho Man because he's another one who knew his character.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was. That's awesome. Last name on the list, Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I love Rowdy. He was another guy that was always on. He was an excellent wrestler, excellent interviewer. I mean, when I wasn't backstage taking pictures and Roddy was doing interviews, we had a little interview thing, I would just go and watch him, go watch his interviews, because I would enjoy it. Because, back, especially in the early days where interviews were so localized. We're coming to Providence, we're coming to Boston, and he would do this interview, and Gene or whoever would go, okay, this is a 20-second spot for Warwick, Rhode Island. So, he would just come up with something different than he came with Boston. And he would just constantly do it. And plus, as a person, he was a sweetheart. I mean, he was just very genuine. I considered him a friend. I got a great picture of him, me putting a headlock on him. Just a nice guy. And I mean, I say that about 99.9% of the talent, that I have so much respect for what they did, and it was awesome to see and get to know some of them behind the scenes.
Yeah. That's great. You have certainly lived a life. If anybody in the audience has a question for Steve Taylor, if not, it's been a great chat.
Great.
And I thank you very much. It's been an
Thank you very
absolute
much.
pleasure,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Thank
you.
you.
Steve Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you.